to my kitchen. Now with Easter just around the corner, I thought this would be the perfect time to show you how to make these really sweet bunny rabbit cupcakes. Okay, let's get started. So the things that we're going to need is, first of all, I've got some vanilla cupcakes, and I will put a link in the description below to the recipe. I've then got a variety of fondant, so you'll need some white fondant, and then I've just coloured some in a peachy colour, and I've got some coloured bits here for some of the details, and I will run through all the colours as we go. You will need around 35 grams of fondant in total. Then got my rolling pin, a craft knife, my ball tool and my Dresden tool. I've got an edible black pen, and this one is just by Fractal Colours. If you don't have one of these, you could just use some black food gel with a little paintbrush. I've got some dusky pink edible tint, some edible glue, my little template for my ears, and I will put a link so that you can download the little shapes. I've got a round cookie cutter, and this one just measures 3 inches across. I've got some Tylo powder, and also just this little dome that's made out of foam that you can use to make your cupcake toppers in advance. The last thing I've actually got is just some vanilla buttercream that we're going to be using to attach our toppers onto our cupcakes. And not forgetting a little flower plunger cutter. Now, the first thing that we need to do is create that little dome of fondant that's going to act as our rabbit's head and go on the top of our cupcake. Now, you have some different options. You could create this directly on top of your cupcake, or you could use these little domes that are made out of foam, and they are just the exact size of the top of your cupcake. These allow you to create your cupcake toppers in advance, let them firm up before adding them onto your cupcakes. Now, if you don't have these little domes, another option that you could use is maybe you have one of these large sphere silicone molds at home. This one measures 7 centimeters across, and it's actually the exact same size as these domes. Now, I'm going to show you both methods, but what you're going to need is a round cookie cutter, and you want this to be just slightly larger than the diameter of your cupcake. So this one is 3 inches across. So what we need to do is just roll out some white fondant. And we want this to be around 3 millimeters in thickness. And we can cut out our circle. You just want to go around the edge, just making sure that that's nice and smooth. Now, if you're using the little domes or the silicone mat, all you want to do is just place that directly over the top, and then just use your hands just to pull that down. So we're not trying to stretch it, just trying to drape that over the top and just mold it to the top of that little dome. Now, with this method, it's great for doing them ahead of time, but you will need to leave them for a few hours or ideally overnight to firm up before you add them onto your cupcakes. So there you just have this little dome ready to decorate. If you're going to create them directly on the top of your cupcake, all we need to do is create a dome for that piece of fondant to sit on. So I'm going to use some of my American buttercream. I'm just using a straight edge knife. We then want to shape this into a dome. I don't want the dome to be super tall, just making it so that I come up around 1.5 centimeters. And then you want to just do exactly the same. So we're going to lay that directly over the top of your cupcake, and you're going to use the sides of your hand just to pull that fondant into shape. So I'm just turning it as I go. So there you have your cupcake with a little dome on the top. So both methods are going to give you exactly the same starting point. We're now going to add the rabbit's facial features. So I've got my Dresden tool, and I'm going to come up around 1.5 centimeters and just push in slightly to create a little oval hole. I'm then going to leave a gap of around 3 centimeters and create another little hole. I've got a very small ball of black fondant, and this one just measures 3 millimeters across. Now I want the eyes to be exactly the same size, so I'm going to cut this directly in half, roll each one just into a little oval shape. I can then pop in some edible glue and just lift those into those holes. I've then got 2 really tiny dots of white fondant that I'm just adding onto those eyes, and I always think this just really brings them to life. Now, using that edible pen, I'm going to come down halfway between the eyes and the bottom, and I'm going to create just a little V shape. And then just add a little line going down. To finish off his little features before we add his ears, I've got some dusky pink edible tint. I'm just going to come just under his eyes, just off to the side, and just add this in, just to add some little rosy cheeks. We're now going to create his ears. So I've got some white fondant and also some peach. Now for this, I just used raspberry and a little bit of yellow. I've also got a little template that I've created, and I will put a link so that you can just download this as a little picture. So this ear just measures around 1 centimetre across and 4 centimetres in height. And then we have the centre of our ear. To start with, I'm going to take a small amount of Tylo powder. Now this is just going to help my ears just firm up slightly. If you didn't have Tylo powder, you could just mix in a tiny little amount of modelling paste, or you could just leave them as a fondant and just let them firm up a little bit more before you add them onto your cupcake. And I'm going to roll this out until it's about 1/2 centimetre in thickness. Now I'm going to take my rolling pin and I'm going to start to taper this down. We're going to leave the bottom of the ears slightly thicker, and this is just going to make it easier to attach these ears onto our cupcake. So I'm going to take my rolling pin and just push down. So you can see it's slightly thicker at this end than up here. I'm then going to place on the larger of the 2 templates. Now my top tip when cutting these out is, first of all, just use your craft knife to score in the shape. If you try and go through all at once, it's really going to stretch out of place. So just score those marks, and then you can go in and just start to go a little bit deeper before cutting those out. I'm just smoothing off around the edges. I'm then going to roll out that peach. So I want to get this as thin as I can, so around 1 millimetre in thickness, and just cut out the smaller inside of the ear. I'm then going to add some edible glue up the centre and stick those 2 pieces together. I want to add a little bit more shape to these, so I'm going to take my ball tool. Now you could use a foam mat. I'm just going to use the palm of my hand. I'm just going to push those 2 pieces together and just blend in those so they look like they're one piece. I'm not pushing too hard, just enough that it's starting to just dip down in the centre. And then I'm going to take my finger and just pull one side over slightly and just create a slight point at the top. And then at the bottom, just push my thumb in and just curve it round a little bit. So you can see the difference. So we're going to do exactly the same on the other one. And I find by doing it in the palm of your hand, because your hand is curved, it just really helps create that shape. But I want it to curve out going the other way. So I can bring back in my little bunny, and I'm going to add some edible glue just on the bottom of those ears. Because we made it quite chunky, we've got quite a lot of fondant to help attach it. And just push down slightly. Now you could leave them like this. I'm actually going to add some flowers. So I've got a variety of different shades of fondant. First of all, I've got a green. Now to make this green, I used the Colour Splash leaf green, just with a little hint of the sunflower yellow. I then used the sunflower to get 2 shades of yellow. I used the Colour Splash raspberry to get a dark and a light pink, and then the Colour Splash violet just to get this really nice lilac colour. So the first one I'm going to work on is just a really little daffodil. So I'm going to roll out that yellow fondant until it's a few millimetres in thickness. And I'm going to cut out a little flower using my little mini plunger cutter. I'm then going to take the small end of my ball tool, and I just want to pull those petals out. Now I'm doing it on the palm of my hand, but if you'd prefer, you could also do it on a foam mat. And I'm going to go in and just pinch the end. Now this is super tiny, so it can be quite fiddly. And then I'm just going to push in the centre just to create a little circle. I'm then going to take a really small amount of the slightly darker yellow. So this one just measures around 3 millimetres across. I'm then going to take the end of my Dresden tool and just push it onto the end and just start to open it out. I'm going to add a little bit of edible glue, or you could also use water, into the centre of my flower. Push that in, and that's going to give us this really teeny tiny daffodil. I'm then going to do exactly the same with the lilac, but instead of pulling those petals out, I'm going to use the end of my Dresden tool just to push in and just create just a little generic flower. Now I'm going to create some little cartoon roses using the 2 different shades of pink. I want to roll this out as thinly as I can and just cut a strip about 1/2 centimetre in width and just wind it round. as I do that, just gonna try and ruffle it slightly as I go. And then when it's at the desired size, I'm just gonna pour that fondant down and just trim that off. And I'm gonna do exactly the same with the darker pink. Now, to go with our 4 little flowers, we're going to need some leaves. So I'm gonna take that green and I'm just gonna take some really small balls, taper off one side, flatten that down. I'm then gonna take my Dresden tool and from the point, I'm just gonna pull back and then I'm gonna slightly pinch that end, just pulling it to one side. And I'm gonna create 5 of these. So here we've got our little flowers to add onto our rabbit's head. So I'm just gonna add some edible glue just along that front. I'm gonna start just with one of the lighter colour roses and just add those in. Added on that purple one, just so we can add this little daffodil into the front. And we can go in again, just add in some of that edible glue and just popping those leaves into position. So I'm just adding them between those flowers. So there we have the little bunny cupcake topper. Now I've created this one on just that foam dome. So you just want to leave this to firm up slightly so that you can lift it off and add it onto your cupcake. Now this one I actually created a few hours ago, so it's been left to firm up on that dome. So you can see that I can just take it off and it just keeps its shape. But it will remain soft enough that you can eat it. So I've got a cupcake and I've also got some buttercream that I've just popped in a piping bag. Now instead of making the dome on the top of the cupcake, all you need to do is just flip that over and we're gonna pop some buttercream just inside there. We don't want to overfill them, especially if you have a little dome on the top of your cupcake. So we just want this to sit nice and flush on the top. So here we have the finished bunny cupcakes. These are just perfect for Easter, or maybe you know somebody who just loves rabbits. I really hope you've enjoyed this video tutorial and you might want to make some of these cupcakes yourself. Now I will put a list of all the tools that I've used throughout today's video in the description below so you can find them there. If you have enjoyed the video, as always, please don't forget to hit that like button. And also, if you haven't already, don't forget you can subscribe to the Cakes by Lens YouTube channel so you don't miss any new videos. So until next time, bye!